Hi, this is Justin Colletti of Sonic Scoop, and today, thanks to our friends at JZ Microphones, I get to take a close look at the newest mic from JZ, the BB29 I've got right here in front of me. In case you haven't noticed, I've been using JZ microphones for almost every episode of the Sonic Scoop podcast for the past more than a year now, and for most of my screen capture tutorials and things like that as well. And I've gone through quite a few of them. I started out with this JZ Amethyst, which a lot of people really like the sound of, and I switched over at some point to the Vintage 67 from JZ. I also for a while was using this one here. This is the Black Hole. Let me see if I can find the box for that guy to give you an even better look. The Black Hole. And now I'm trying out this one, the BB29. And this is interesting because it's actually the first mic in the JZ line that has a transformer output. What is exactly does that mean? Why is that interesting? Why should that be important? Why should we care? Well, we'll get into that, and we'll hear this mic compared to some others on a few sources together. We will hear it on some drums, some percussion, obviously some of my voice here. I'll even play some acoustic guitar for you just to give you a sense of how it performs and whether this is a style of microphone that might make sense in your studio. Before we get too deep into it, I do want to say that we are giving away one of these microphones. You can enter to win one for free over at sonicscoop.com/contest. That's sonicscoop.com/contest. Occasionally, these JZ mics will go on sale as well. You can buy them direct from the manufacturer at a discount. This only happens a couple times a year or so. So to get your special super secret discount code when that's available, make sure you sign up for the newsletter over at sonicscoop.com. Go to the top right-hand side of your screen. You'll see a newsletter sign up right there. And if you're on that list, we will let you know when there is a huge deal on these microphones, often as much as 50% off. So definitely stay tuned for that. If this time is like past times, these mics have gone on sale just about when the video comes out or shortly thereafter. I think we're timing these things. So definitely check it out, sonicscoop.com, sign up for the newsletter, or if you want to try to win one of these for free, in addition, get yourself a pair, go to sonicscoop.com/contest, where you can sign up to win one as well. All right, let's get right into an even closer look at these and start hearing them on a few different sources together. I've done other video comparisons with the JZs before. This one's going to be focused on the BB29, and I'm going to be comparing it most of the time pretty directly to the Black Hole, because these two microphones actually share the same capsule, but they do, or at least should, sound pretty different. How different can two mics sound with the same capsule? Well, you tell me. I'll actually pull up the frequency response chart for them right here, right now. Here's the frequency response chart for the BB29, and you can see it's got a little bit of a lift here around 500 hertz, and then some lift in the top end, a nice bump here around 7K, and another big bump here between 10 and 15K, maybe around 12, 13K, something like that. And you can see that the Black Hole that actually shares the same capsule has a much flatter frequency response. There's the tiniest little lift down bottom between, say, 50 and 100 hertz, and a tiny little lift up again around 3 or 4K with a much flatter top end. So interesting. Same capsule, different sounds. Why is this? Well, part of it is going to be the transformer, but also capsules can be tuned differently. You can also have head basket design, changing the sound of microphones slightly. But same capsule, two different sounds. And we found that also with these, the Amethyst and the Vintage 67. When I tried these guys out, people were surprised to hear, although obviously they had a similar tone, similar lineage, the Amethyst just sounded a little bit fatter and thicker on bottom, while the Vintage 67 sounded maybe just a little tighter on bottom and a little brighter on top. Is the sound here going to be a similar difference, or is it going to be much more significant? You tell me. Let's start hearing them back and forth right now, starting on voice, and then I'll get into this idea about talking about why a transformer output on a microphone might be useful, might be interesting to you, and something that you can think about in your own mic purchases. So here I am talking directly into the BB29. And hopefully you can hear some of that lift in the high frequency. This one was really designed to kind of stand out in a mix. And on my voice by itself in a solo podcast format, maybe it could be a little bright for some taste compared to others. But the idea here is standing out in a modern production where vocals are often EQ'd to be brought forward a bit more. And the BB29 should sound a little bit like that right out of the box. Comparing that to The Black Hole, which again itself is a pretty bright, clear, detailed sounding mic, but it doesn't have quite the same level of boost in the top end that something like the BB29 does. I'll get a little closer to these now. And here I am on the Black Hole at a very close distance. I'll be careful not to pop my P's too much because I'm doing it without the pop filter at the moment. And then here I am at a very similar distance on the BB29. I'm going to get right up onto it, and I'll ride these levels in post so that you can get a decent idea for the actual differences in sound between these two mics. But here I am really swallowing this mic, and here I am really swallowing the other one. Can you hear a significant difference from further back? Here is the BB29 again, and here is the Black Hole at a decent distance. But now let's get into this idea of the transformer output on the BB29. Why a transformer output? Well, back in the day, pretty much all mics used transformers when condenser mics were first invented. So a lot of vintage mics and the most celebrated vintage mics in history had transformer outputs. It wasn't until much later on, probably the 1970s and later, even later than that, 80s, 90s, 2000s is when we saw more and more mics switch more and more over to transformerless designs. And there's some benefits to transformerless designs. Every mic in the JZ lineup until now has been transformerless. And some of the benefits of going transformerless are they tend to be a little bit cleaner. You can get higher output out of them, higher input into them before they distort. It tends to be maybe easier to get a really flat frequency response out of them. They can be less expensive to build, less heavy. They can be smaller overall. But there are some potential negatives also to going for a transformerless design. And one of the big benefits of a transformer output that a lot of people look for today is that, yeah, they can have a little bit of subtle color. And I wouldn't say that the transformer is the biggest part of the sound of those vintage mics that everyone loved. It wasn't just because they had transformers, but it's definitely part of their sound. Some of the things that can happen that people often say that they're hearing with a transformer design is a little bit more airiness in the top end and maybe a little bit more heft in the low end. And that's something that a lot of people come back to, saying you're going to get airier highs, creamier lows with a transformer. There's also potentially a soft, subtle saturation out of them. But it's not really that kind of saturation where you're pushing the thing hard and it distorts slightly in a subtly pleasant way. It's not so much the case with most transformers. If you push them hard, they will distort in a way that sounds pretty bad. But long before you get to distortion, you can have a little bit of a kind of transient smoothing effect that just softens the edges of the sound a little bit. And while they'll still sound really detailed and nice, they'll sound just potentially a little warmer, a little rounder, a little smoother, all things being equal, than a transformerless design. So there's definitely room in the world for both types. In case the look of this mic, the BB29, looks familiar to you, it probably owes a lot of its visual heritage as well as its sonic heritage to designs like the Blue Blueberry. It's probably the closest mic out there to it. In fact, the guy whose initials are emblazoned on every JZ microphone, a guy named Juris Zarins. He was making microphones in Latvia, and he was working very early on with Blue and helped them out. A lot of their early designs went out into his own with his companies Violet and JZ, and a lot of those old Violet microphones have been reissued by JZ, such as the Amethyst. But Juris Zarins, who's a really prolific mic designer, took a lot of those designs he was working early on with the team at Blue Microphones and kind of revamped them and reimagined them through his other lines, Violet and JZ. And this is one such design where you'll see a similar mic in Blue, which, interestingly enough, originally was a Latvian company, which not everybody knows. All right, so how does this mic sound? How good does it sound compared to the other options? You let me know. Here I am again talking into the BB29, and here I am again on the JZ Black Hole. I'm going to do the same kind of thing with a couple of other mics here real quick, and then we'll hear it on drums, and I'll do a little pass between these two on acoustic guitar. But before I do, let's hear this BB29 right next to the vintage 67, which is another mic where you can find a couple of videos of me comparing it to other JZ microphones. So long story short, definitely the brightest voiced microphone from JZ yet. Really meant to stand out in front of dense arrangements in kind of modern production styles. Is it going to be the best microphone choice for me on the solo podcast as a relatively bright mic? I don't know. You tell me. I've had different comments down below, having put out just one episode of me on this microphone so far, and I've heard different things. Some people saying, oh, this is too bright compared to the other ones. You should go back to the vintage 67. That's the one I love for your voice on the podcast. I've also had other people write in saying, oh my goodness, the top end on that is amazing, and it has such a nice, warm, round sound. You should be using this one. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below how you think it compares to the other mics from JZ, or if you've tried it yourself, any other mics that you might own. Let's just go through a few of these real quick. I want you to be able to hear it next to some of the other mics that I've used on the podcast, and then we'll put it through its paces, particularly against the black hole on a few different instrument sources. So let's hear it. Here I am on the JZ BB29 transformerless output, relatively bright top end, but a little bit of a kind of low mid-range push as well, and nice bottom end. And then here I am at a similar distance on the JZ Black Hole, which is transformerless and meant to be really neutral, really kind of clean and flat up top, but a little bit of lift around 3-4K to just bring a tiny bit of extra presence and definition. Going back again to the BB29, and with a little bit of a magic snap of my fingers, that JZ Black Hole suddenly magically turned into an amethyst. You can tell I'm a mastering guy now because I only own 2 mic stands. So here I am talking into the JZ Amethyst, and here I am at a similar distance talking into the JZ BB29. Here I think you should be able to tell a pretty significant difference between the brighter voiced BB29 and the slightly darker, fuller-bodied Amethyst. Although if you look over at the frequency response chart for the Amethyst, there is also a little bit of a boost up around, the 5K area or so on the Amethyst. So not a totally flat, neutral sounding mic. Here we are on the Amethyst, and here we are on the BB29. Let's do this one more time. Let me see if I can abracadabra you one more time here. Here we go. Oh my goodness, it worked. What amazing post-production effects. Now I'm talking into the JZ Vintage 67. And this has been one of my favorites to use on the podcast because, again, like the Amethyst, it really had great off-axis coloration. I could kind of go off either way and really have a similar tone in either direction. Sounded nice from far away, sounded nice close up. There's something I love about the real fat richness of the Amethyst, but there's just a tiny bit of extra detail in this Vintage 67 I found. And if we look at it on a frequency response chart, has theoretically really similar frequency response to the Amethyst, but I found it had just a slightly different tone, just a slight tiny bit more clarity and a slightly tighter bottom than the Amethyst, which I've also liked a lot. Let's compare that now to the brighter voiced BB29. And here it is, again, a microphone that's meant to stand in the front, and it's got that transformer output for potentially just a little bit more warmth and softening of transients for a slightly more vintage vibe while still sounding really forward and bright and defined. What are your favorites? Let me know down in the comments below. How do you think this mic stands up to the others? We'll now hear in a few other sources in case you want to save your vote until after you've heard it on drums and guitar and some other stuff like that. Let's hear some actual music. My buddy Chris Swist is going to help me once again. He's been helping me with this whole series on JZ microphones over at his studio called Evenfall Studios. So big thanks to Chris for helping out. You can check him out. He is a great drummer, percussionist, educator, engineer. So big thanks to Chris. We'll hear him playing some percussion. I'll do my hacky job of amateur acoustic guitar playing to give you a sense for how this stands up next to the Black Hole. And let us know what you think. All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed this overview of the BB29 from JZ Microphones. Relatively bright and kind of forward compared to some of their others, but with a little bit more of that maybe soft transient response that you expect out of a transformer-based design. Let me know, how's it fare for you compared to some of the other JZ microphones we've been through? Are you digging the sound of this one? What are some of your favorite applications for this type of mic? Let us know in the comments down below. Also, make sure that you sign up. We're doing a giveaway with JZ Microphones. If you're watching this when it comes out, you can check that out at sonicscoop.com/contest. That's sonicscoop.com/contest, where you can enter to win a BB29 of your own. So definitely check it out there. Also, often after we've done one of these videos, JZ Microphones will put some of these on sale with an exclusive discount code just for Sonic Scoop readers, and they've gone for as much as 50% off. This only happens a couple of times a year or so, so you definitely want to make sure you're on the Sonic Scoop mailing list to sign up for that, to make sure you can find out when any or all of these JZ microphones go on sale, on a super secret sale for Sonic Scoop readers. So check that out over at sonicscoop.com, where you can sign up for our newsletter up at the top right-hand side of the screen. Check it out there. Make sure that you're on the list, and that way you will know when there are great deals in audio gear, including JZ mics and other stuff too. All right, thanks again for joining me. This has been Justin Colletti of Sonic Scoop, brought to you by JZ Microphones this time. Thanks for hanging out with me. See you next time.